Hi, my name is Mr. Z. I am Brittany's third grade teacher. I want to talk to you today about a state required test that all of my students have taken. I want to run through each test component individually. If you have any questions along the way, stop me at any time.
Okay, hi Mr. C. I am probably going to have a lot of questions because I'm not familiar with any type of testing the students do.
Let me assure you that it is not as complicated as it seems. First off, the name of the test is the Texas Assessment of Achievement. An achievement test is a test that measures what your child has learned throughout the school year. Brittany took this test in April of 2007. Before we review how well Brittany's scores are, keep in mind that there are limitations for any standardized test. For example, this test measures her achievement during a specific time frame, so if she happened to have been sick that day, sleepy, or had any other distractions, she may have not performed as well as she could have. The first page of the Texas Assessment of Achievement test is divided into two sections. The top portion is called the Norm Reference Test, and the lower portion is the Criterion Reference Test.
So what does norm reference mean?
I'm glad you asked. We'll talk about norm reference first and then move into a criterion reference. Norm reference means that there is a norm group, which is a group of students across the United States that have taken the test. We then compare your child's scores to that norm group to see how she performed.
Are these kids average or above average?
This norm group is a diverse group of students from different cultures and education levels. The purpose of the norm groups is to help ensure that the test is non-biased and gives us a comparison group. So let's take a look at some of the different sections of the test that Brittany completed. The first column is a list of the subtests in the assessment. A subtest is a component of a section of the test. For example, vocabulary is a subtest of reading. If you take a look at the next two columns, one is the number of items and the other is raw scores. The number of items is the total number of questions in the section, and raw score refers to the number of items that Brittany got correct. So let's look at the subtest language. The number of items is 45, and Brittany mastered 41 of those questions. Did you have any questions or concerns on these subtests?
Well, I was wondering, what are basic battery and complete battery?
That's an excellent question. The complete battery includes all the testing components, while the basic battery includes science and social study. Excludes science and social study. So now let's talk about the number of items and raw scores in these two sections. The basic battery has 330 items, and the complete battery has 390 items. Brittany's raw score was 256 for the basic battery and 303 for the complete battery. Do you have any questions so far?
No, I think I understand everything so far.
Let's move on to the next column that talks about the national percentile. The national percentile is not an actual letter grade. It is how well Brittany did compared to the norm group. So now let's discuss a couple of Brittany's test scores in the percentile column. Brittany's reading comprehension is a 68 national percentile. To give you a better understanding of how well she did, I want you to show you on the bell curve. Okay. To read this graph, I need to point out that the average in the midpoint of the bell curve is at 50. Brittany scored a 68 percentile, which puts her above average in reading comprehension. Brittany scored better than 68 percentile of children in the norm group.
Oh, I'm so relieved. I thought that 68 meant that she was failing. Thank you so much for explaining that to me. One other thing concerns me though. She does have a couple of 40s in the national percentile column.
Oh, no problem. I'm here to help. Let's look at the procedures of total mathematics and see where she falls on the bell curve. Her national percentile is 44, which may look like she's below average on the bell curve, but there is a SEM of 4.
Okay, what is an SEM?
An SEM is for standard error of measurement, and the number, which in this case is 4, is the degree in which her score can fluctuate, plus or minus 4. So looking at the procedure rule for total mathematics, Brittany's 44 for percentile can be considered a 48, which makes her score average.
Okay, that makes sense.
So we are still looking at the norm reference portion of the assessment. If you will look to the far right, you will see a percentile bands column. This column graphs the SEM plus or minus score of each of Brittany's subtests. Please notice that most of her assessments fall on or above average.
Okay, that makes me feel great.
What I would like to do now is to show you this Steinlein score on the bell curve. Steinlein's is a scoring system that is divided into 9 parts. A score of 1 to 3 is considered to be below average, a score of 4 to 6 is average, and 7 to 9 is above average. So if you look at the lowest average score of 4 and above, you will notice Brittany does not fall below this average rank. let's look at Brittany's lowest percentile score of 39 in problem solving. I also want to point out to you that Brittany's percentile score of 76 in listening is above average. I do need to point out that there are limitations to this test as well. When you compare Brittany's 39 in problem solving and her 76 in listening, she is considered to be average in both subtests. With this system, the scores are really far apart, making the St. Anne's score less precise.
So what you're saying is that the Steinein's grading system may not be completely accurate in telling me specifically where Brittany is at compared to the norm reference group?
That's correct.
Okay.
The column to the right of the St. Anne's score is the scaled score. The scaled score can show growth over several years when compared to the norm group.
Where are the scaled scores listed on the bell curve?
The scaled scores is the fifth row down from the top. It uses a numbering system of intervals of 50. Looking at the top scores of this section, the total reading is 508 and vocabulary is 498. The scale for this test is 200 to 800 with 500 as the mean. Using the scale scores, Brittany falls in the average portion of the bell curve when compared to the norm group. Let's look at the final column in the norm reference section. The NCE is another standard score that uses 50 as the average when compared to the norm group. Looking back at the bell curve, the NCE is located right under the scale system.
Okay, what does the NCE stand for?
NCE stands for normal curve equivalent.
I noticed that the grading intervals are by tens. Does that make it more precise?
It does not necessarily make it more precise, but it does make it easier to read. Look at her score for science. It is a 71. When finding her score of 71 on the NCE system, it is easier to find it on the graph and see that she is above average in science.
So how do you use this information to help Brittany in the areas that she is struggling in?
This information, along with her performance in class, will help me evaluate not only her performance, but also my instruction. So this assessment kind of acts as a guide, and if her scores coincide with her classroom performance, then I will know in what ways to modify my instruction.
Wow, it seems like there is a lot to consider when evaluating how well a child is doing.
Yes, there is a lot to consider when evaluating a child. That brings us to the second portion of the Texas Assessment of Achievement. Let's look at the criterion reference portion. This part is a measure of how your student performs on a specific standard or objective.
So how exactly is it different than the norm reference?
Good question. First of all, this portion does not have a norm group to compare scores to. Second, it is more detailed in that it considers how many items she attempted. Let's go over the criterion portion together. Please feel free to ask me any questions along the way. There are three basic columns for the criterion assessment: RS, NP, and NA. RS stands for raw score, which is the number she got correct. NP stands for the number possible, which is the number of questions in that section. NA is the numbers attempted, which refers to both the right and wrong answers she gave. Let's look at word reading. Brittany's raw score is 27, the number of items she got right. Her NP is 30, which is the total amount of questions, and her numbers attempted is 29. With this data, you can see that out of 30 questions, she attempted 29 and got 27 correct. To the right of these scores are three more columns that will tell you whether or not Brittany scored below, above, or at average with a check mark. In word reading, she scored above average. You can look down the list and tell me if you have any questions about the content areas.
Okay. On number facts, there are 8 questions and she got 7 right. Why did she only score average here?
Some of the subtests, like number facts, assess skills that a student has already mastered. This portion does not contain a lot of questions. Therefore, if the child misses 1 or 2, it will label them average. Another area that is scored in the same way is computation and context. There are only 6 questions and Brittany answered 6 correctly, so she scored above average. I would not worry too much about the number facts scores, because if you look at her classroom performance, you'll see that she does very well at number facts.
Okay. Wow, she really is doing very well on number of facts. I like how you compare her classwork to the test.
What I can do to make sure Brittany stays on task in number of facts is give her or provide her opportunity for practice during center time. I can also send a game home about number of facts, and you can play with her to provide extra practice for her. Do you have any questions about what we looked over today?
I don't think so.
Please take another minute to review the Texas Assessment of Achievement, and while you are doing that, I want to give you this handout to take home So it would help you explain in more detail what we talk about the test scores today. I want to reiterate that this information guides me to giving the best instruction to Brittany. Thank you, Mrs. Pinker, for taking time out of your day to sit with me and discuss Brittany's achievement.
Thank you, Mr. Z.
You like my little...